My name's Louise Taggart and I'm a manager in PwC UK's cyber threat intelligence team, and I focus in particular on strategic analysis. So my career before I joined PwC was actually fairly circuitous. So after I left university, I actually worked in roles in fashion and then in private equity research, so completely unrelated to cybersecurity. I then spent about 3 years actually working in the political risk consulting industry. And that was really where I got to do more in-depth strategic analysis on threats for clients in different sectors. Although actually that was more focused on kind of traditional political and security risks, again, rather than cybersecurity. I actually studied a variety of Eastern European languages at university, as well as regional politics and security. So that was my opportunity to start actually applying these directly to the research I was doing as part of that political risk job, which was something that I really enjoyed. So I got the opportunity to join PwC about 6 years ago, initially as a strategic cyber threat intelligence analyst, focusing in particular on threats emanating from the former Soviet Union region. So obviously that was leveraging the skills that I picked up from my previous political risk role, as well as, of course, what I'd studied at university. So initially I was producing analysis that was complementary to the technical work that the team was producing, so providing that kind of strategic context to the cyber activity that we as a team were tracking. Since I progressed to manager, in addition to that analysis and reporting, I'm also taking on greater responsibilities too around project management, for example. So that might be contracting, risk management, managing budgets, liaising and building relationships with clients, reviewing reports, and as well as kind of beginning to take some of our services to market as well. I'm also actually really interested in the kind of the wider people and culture angle of the industry. So I've actually also been the training lead within the PwC UK cyber team for the past 3 years, which has been a great opportunity because that's meant I've been involved in planning training budgets, getting to know and working with external providers, and also thinking strategically about policies and procedures for the future as well. Yeah, so I think in general, learning another language gives you a broader understanding of different perspectives and different mindsets, which is actually a really useful skill set to have in general when it comes to producing analysis. I think for my role specifically, actually having a knowledge of regional languages and politics means that I can do my research in original languages. So that might be reading news reporting from the region. It might be looking at social media posts, for example, as well as also having that appreciation for how an individual event or an individual incident fits into the broader or longer term trends and regional relationships. So I think it's definitely beneficial. So I think the question of the overlap of geographic exposure and the cyber threat landscape is one that really interests me in general. I think driven by my experience of working both in political risk, which tends to be quite geographic oriented, and also in cyber threat intelligence. So when we speak to clients about these kinds of issues, often they will see cybersecurity through the same lens as some of the other operational risks that they deal with. So that might be, for example, political violence in locations they have offices. It might be political risks, for example, such as like expropriation of assets. And those types of threats are, I suppose, in many ways actually quite easy to align by geographical exposure, because often they're driven by, like local, specific local or specific national issues. So, for example, like the rule of law in a certain jurisdiction is very clearly bound by that country's borders. Cybersecurity considerations, however, don't necessarily fall into those same kind of country-specific buckets as other types of business risk. That's not to say that geography can't have an effect on an organisation's cyber threat profile. So, for example, a company operating in the critical national infrastructure of a foreign country with a high level of state involvement, could obviously be a more attractive target. But I think it's important to consider that actually many of the sophisticated threat actors out there, they often will look for the easiest way into an organisation's network rather than targeting a specific country per se. So that might mean that, whilst the initial attack vector might target a specific access point initially, the actual intended target is the wider network or system. And also, realistically, targeting constantly evolves as well, depending on the tasking priorities that are given to a threat actor too. So it's not necessarily as cut and dried as some other risks that businesses will be thinking about. Yeah, so when it comes to thinking about cyber threat intelligence over the next few years, I think or I hope that we'll see it actually become increasingly embedded in other parts of the industry. So I think one great example of how this has already happened is threat-led penetration testing, for example. So the CREST framework is obviously a well-known one across the industry, and I think really set that standard for making sure that threat intelligence is incorporated and really seen as part of a whole process. So I'm hoping that those kind of trends will continue. So from my own experience, I think there is increasingly much greater recognition that recruiting people from like non-technical and diverse backgrounds actually brings real benefits. For example, by introducing different mindsets and approaches to how things might be done. Threat intelligence, obviously the discipline that I work in, can be very varied. So I think my main suggestion would be just to do some research of what either threat intelligence or the part of cybersecurity you're interested in, what it actually comprises. Do some research into the different types of services that are out there, the different skill sets that it comprises, and then thinking about how your own skill set can translate into that. I think as well, just more broadly, it's important to be able to demonstrate your passion and interest for the industry, even if you don't have any direct experience or background in it. I think you can still talk with interest and really demonstrate that you're really keen to be involved in the industry. Well, obviously resources like this series from CREST are a great start. I think, other things you can do include reading industry blogs or white papers. That's, I think, a fairly easy way to start. Social media, of course, is obviously a great tool for getting a sense of how the industry operates. What are the hot topics which are being discussed at the minute? And I think as well, the companies that are involved in this industry, whether that be cybersecurity more broadly or threat intelligence, they often have a huge amount of information available on their websites. That might be research they've published, it might be conference papers their teams have presented, it might be podcasts they produce, it could even be something a bit more basic like an annual report. But there is in general just a huge amount of information out there. It just can take a bit of wading through to find the really useful content. Yeah, so the A to Z of Tech podcast is something I've actually been, I think, really fortunate to be involved in over the past couple of years. So we've had some brilliant guests joining us, and I've had the opportunity to have some really insightful conversations that I think otherwise I wouldn't have been able to take part in. So as an overview, each episode features at least 2 guests and explores a specific technology-related topic, themed, of course, by each letter of the alphabet. One of the more recent episodes that we recorded was N for nanotechnology, which was one that I really enjoyed. And we talked about some of the opportunities that nanotech presents for science and business, particularly thinking about medicine and also sustainable technology. And it actually featured a really interesting historical example, which I had no idea about, which was a physical phenomenon. And it transpired that actually thousands of years ago, the Persians were making ice in the middle of the desert, which I found fairly mind-blowing. But was just one of the kind of cool facts that we discovered as part of the conversation.